Data has become a critical business asset for companies today. In this conversation, we will explore how data is going to change the world and what the next generation of data platform needs to look like to allow companies to really leverage their data. To discuss this with me today, I am joined by Raj Verma, who is the Chief Executive Officer of SingleStore. Hi, Raj.
Hey Bernard, how are you? It's a pleasure to join you this morning. It's a beautiful day here in the Silicon Valley, and yeah, it's a pleasure.
It's so nice. So SingleStore offers a unified database for fast analytics on any data, anywhere to deliver actionable insights and truth in every moment. You're a hot startup from the Silicon Valley area. So why did you choose to work in the data space and why SingleStore?
Yeah, sorry about this noise in the background. It's my new 3.5-year-old colleague that is running around the house that I haven't found a way to temper him down. But
I
yeah,
have, I have the same issues here. I've got my three kids at home.
exactly. Mine are four, and yeah, so we compete for bandwidth and everything. That's the world we live in, and I think that's a pretty good segue into how I found myself to have the privilege of being on the stage with you. Uh,
Mm,
Before I start off, I think you're doing some amazing work. I've followed your, LinkedIn lives and other material, and they're very thought provoking. And some of my thoughts have been shaped with some of the stuff that I heard on your show. So keep up the good work.
thank
Um, as I say, I didn't find, or it wasn't really. I didn't find data. I think data space found me. And when you look back at your career, you always think that you planned every facet of your journey, but a lot of that was serendipitous. Really, you saw an opportunity, you either took it or didn't take it, and that's what sort of impacted how you progressed down your professional career.
you.
I back in the day joined a what I thought was a great company, and it was in the BPM space called Software out of the UK, and just had a great time with BPM and monetizing BPM value propositions.
Mm,
So I got involved more with process first, and naturally, process and data are sort of adjacencies. And we got acquired by Tipco Software in 2004, and that's where my journey and my love affair with data started, and it has continued still. So when I was sort of at the crossroads of what I wanted to do in 2019, about a little less than 2 years ago, and what did I want to sort of commit the next decade of my life doing? I wanted it to be in the data space just because the outcomes of applying data to various enterprises are very divergent. Unlike the application world, where you want your customers to see the world through your application lens to a converged sort of a outcome, and that to me is relatively boring compared to the outcomes that data can provide. So that was one, because if you come to think of the outcomes that data provides, even our customers, I mean, you've got a ride sharing company that uses us for business analytics of, where their drivers should be, and, when does a surge pricing apply versus not? What are the other analytics as to when should you get what material for food delivery, etc. So, I mean, that's one aspect. Whereas a very large telecommunication provider, was able to help the CDC with the COVID track and trace using our platform. And on the other side, there is a lot of our technology being used to help educate kids. We were talking about kids earlier on this conversation.
mm,
All four of my kids go to school from home. Actually, three of the four, and all of them are now getting used to something that not only they aren't used to, we as parents aren't used to, which is converting your house into a classroom. And how do you navigate whether a student is paying attention is on Instagram, Snapchat, or what have you, or on some other website checking sports trivia. And just managing and giving them an experience of a classroom at home is what GoGuardian does, a company that I have admired even before they were our customers. And
mm,
I've gotten to know their management team and their founder. And it's a very noble cause, and the fact that we can contribute to that, from a societal standpoint, is highly, highly fulfilling and rewarding. To the point of Thorn, which is a website dedicated to stop child trafficking, which I'm sure, much like yourself, is something extremely, extremely close to my heart.
Mm.
And apart from all the kudos that you get for business growth, etc., and the monetary aspects of the business, it's projects like this that make you feel good when you put that sheet over yourself at night and sleep better. And that is what data does to the world. I think it makes the world a better place. And the fact that we can contribute in that in a small way is really what I want to do for the rest of my life.
That's a very noble cause. This is great. So, what are some of your favorite examples of how data is actually changing our world, or that illustrate the influence of data?
Yeah, my favorite example is something that's actually not yet a customer of ours. Let's put it that way. So this is not a plug for SingleStore. It's robotic surgery.
Mm.
And a company like, and I'm giving them a free plug here, not saying that they even need it, is Intuitive Surgical, is probably a prime example of how data and the use of data even surpassed my sort of imagination of sorts. Now you can actually perform surgery with you can actually do most surgeries like appendicitis surgery with a 3 millimeter opening in your body, and then you send the robot, and the doctor could actually be sitting at home or in a faraway location feeling like he is performing the surgery, right? But of course, the robot is, and not only is does that help. And by the way, the difference between their technology, and I'm not an expert at it. I've just my knowledge is just based on what I've read. So probably as much as this person who's read the same article or spoken to a few people about it, is just the sense of depth that the surgeon gets when operating is a lot more realistic, so that they don't sort of affect the placement of other organs, and be able to be more precise with what they have to do, or more surgical. And the other is the feeling. They have a technical word, and I think it's hepatic feel that they have, so that they don't hold something too firmly to break or rupture it, or too lightly not to be able to perform the surgery. And it's just amazing how now a surgeon could be anywhere and perform a life-saving surgery thousands of miles away with minimal sort of recovery process. Now that impacts hospital capacity. It impacts recovery. It impacts the number of people that can be afforded that surgery. Now, that's not even the best part of it. Now, it's probably not good news for too many surgeons here, but the fact is that there is enough data that the robots, because they perform whatever, I think it is 6,000 or some odd surgeries a month, they have enough data that there are a certain set of surgeries that can be performed without the involvement of a surgeon. Of course, the FDA wouldn't approve it, at least yet. It's like self-driving aircrafts, which will probably never, or self-piloting aircrafts, which will never get approved. But the fact that data has enabled us to literally save lives, literally, right? Just surgically save lives is outstanding. And it is, yeah, I mean, the other bit is I feel like I'm in Disneyland every single day, because I wake up and I hear stuff about data and how it's changing lives almost every single day. So yeah, it's like living in a theme park, and getting paid to do it. So it's a privilege.
This is why I'm in this space as well. I get this is so exciting. All the the innovations that we're seeing nowadays are basically enabled by data, whether we talk about artificial intelligence and machine learning, about blockchain, about virtual reality, all of these technologies, the Internet of Things, all of these are enabled by data. So data is the fuel for all of this.
It is.
Um, so how we've now lived through COVID. So how has the way companies use data changed? What has been the impact of COVID on the way we use data, and how would you describe this changing data landscape that you are seeing?
Yeah, I think a couple of points. The first is no one anticipated COVID-19. There wasn't a manual that you could consult. I wish we had. And it was just a pretty trying and testing times for society at large, right? And businesses, of course. And again, as I've often said, it's a testimony to just the human tenacity as to how we've managed to not only almost get through it, or hopefully get through it, but also some of the companies actually thrived during this time. And for that, I think a few things happened. Firstly, COVID, from a data strategy perspective, took away the year 2021, 22, 23 from the roadmap that companies had to implement their digital transformation, and landed them, in end of 2023, beginning of 2024. So they had to do probably 3 years worth of work in a matter of months. Correct.
Mm,
And I think the other bit that it highlighted, the reason why they had to do it was because for companies who were using data as taillights, which is essentially trends of what happened in the past and being able to react to those trends tomorrow, assuming that your tomorrow is going to look exactly like your yesterday, were just completely disrupted because your tomorrow brought about completely new challenges. So being able to navigate through this kind of foggy weather, you had to use data as headlights rather than taillights.
mm,
And if you have to use data as headlights, it's a very different latency requirement, speed requirement, flexibility requirements than when you're using data as taillights, right? So that fundamental change in the way data was consumed, used for actioning and decision making was was fundamentally different in the COVID era than the pre-COVID era. And I think data was helpful in validating certain decisions pre-COVID. But post-COVID, I think data was the only thing that you had to make your decisions because there was nothing else that you had access to, or at least a vast majority of things that you had access to were taken away from us. Right
mm,
now, and pardon my term here, but companies that had a data architecture which was fair weather data architecture struggled. But companies who had a shit happens data architecture, right, as I tend to call it, survived. And what is a shit happens data architecture? Shit happens data architecture is flexible, it's hybrid, it's fast. It's not about innovative use of technology or existing technologies to use data, but it is innovative ways of using data using technology, right? And that's a huge difference, by the way. And if you are, as I continue to say, that we are going through a renaissance era in data.
mm,
And if you're going to get a crayon to that party, you aren't going to succeed. And I think a lot of companies realize that you do need shit happens architecture in data. And to the credit, most companies have realized that. But then there are certain companies, one of which I was talking to just yesterday, which are just so steeped in heritage. And in fact, it's really worrying because it's a company that I otherwise admired. Where in talking to their head of data and architecture, he claimed that they had almost no data challenges. There was nothing that they needed out of data that they weren't getting. And so you do have those companies, and we will probably see them not. We should buy their signage because that might be worth a lot of money in a couple of years. Antique.
It's crazy. Yeah, so data. I think you're absolutely right. Data has become the such an important asset for organizations, such as an important tool to help them navigate through this ever-changing landscape. And I think if one word is really important, is fast and more flexible. They are for me some of the key words that lots of my clients talk about. That even Walmart is one of my customers, and they have moved from looking at the last 90 days of transaction data to simply now looking at weeks at most, because consumer habits are changing so rapidly in this current situation. And I think this is what lots of organizations are realizing. Data has a shelf life, and the shelf life seems to be reducing all the time. And having the flexibility to pull together lots of different data sources, I think, is another key thing that has emerged over the last 12 months.
Oh, no, you're spot on. I do think that another aspect, and I think you're alluding to exactly that, that has emerged is data is data is data. The CEO of the company you mentioned, Walmart, doesn't look at data as analytical data, operational data, streaming data, data on the edge. For him or for the executive team, data is data, right? And a lot of the technologies that were built decades ago still segment data into OLAP and OLTP and streaming and real time, and those are just artificial segmentation of data. And I think they actually introduce latency by way of gaining insights, or what I tend to say is, how what is your ability to action your intent? Because most companies have the right intent. I mean, whether it's Walmart or it's a mom and pop shop, they do want to keep their customers happy and be very customer centric. Just that they just don't know how to action that intent, and to do it repeatedly and consistently. And a lot of that is steeped in the fact that there are such data silos that still exist, because what we tend to do is we silo the data and then try and connect them to get a unified view. Well, that's sort of putting stuff in various data warehouses and then having trucks that bring your goods from one data warehouse to the other, versus saying, well, there is a large data warehouse where all kind of commodities are there, and whatever we want to go look for is neatly shelved, and we can go access it and query it. Now, and that is the way the data architecture of the future would be, whether it's us or someone else. I'm not here to plug SingleStore necessarily, even though I guess my background speaks otherwise. But the fact of the matter is that whether we do it or someone else does it, the workload segmentation will go away. The data world would be hybrid. The data world would be fast. The data world would be, I mean, the worst business model that database companies have had is they can't rip us out. That's a very sad business model to have, right? Unless and until we as technology providers make a concerted effort to say we will earn our customers business every day, every week, every month, every year. And if they think there is a better technology that they need to get to, there are no shackles that are holding them back, right? The data world would not be transformed. And you and I both know of hundreds of billions of dollars worth of market cap that has been created by companies by saying they can't rip us off. Sorry, they can't rip us out as a customer. Well, they did rip you off, I suppose, but that architecture, or that business model of making it so locked in that no matter how much a customer struggles, they can't do without you, will be the dinosaur era of databases in the next few years. And we take great pride in the fact that we will never have a lock-in architecture. We will have a earn it architecture.
Mm. Very good. Before we look into what you would see as the data platform of the future, I just want to acknowledge people joining us. We've got people from all over the world as usual. Let me just scroll through. We've got Edward from Ghana in Africa. We've got Augustin from New York. We've got someone from Toronto, from Kenya, from Bangalore, from Brazil, another one from the Big Apple, Egypt, for someone. We've got Marcy from North Carolina, someone from Algiers in Africa, from Iowa, from Kampala in Africa, from Memphis, Tennessee, from Vancouver, Canada. Hi, George. So it's great to see everyone here, and let us know what you think. Comment, share, as always. That makes it a lot more engaging. So, Raj, what does that mean then for the data platform of the future? The increased need for flexibility, the increased need for speed. How would you describe the data platform that organizations will need in the future?
Yeah, I think the fact of speed and cost of ownership and flexibility. I mean, come to think of it, it's just it's not the fact that I'm a CEO of a scale up company rather than a startup company, which is of certain size, that I'm saying this. But in the database space, every CEO would say that fast would win over slow, and expensive would lose to inexpensive, and rigid would lose to the flexible architecture. So I think those are definitely the tenets of a modern architecture, or shit happens architecture, designed for um, a, for data architecture in any organization, in my opinion. Right? Now, the concept of speed sometimes is not understood quite, at least by some customers of ours or prospects of ours, because the tendency is to say, "Hey, look, I can wait for 5 seconds for a query. I'm not going to disrupt my data architecture for 5 seconds response time." And that's probably fair in most cases, right? Unless it's life threatening or what have you. Now, and even in life threatening, you could argue 5 seconds is not going to probably make a difference, right? In most cases. However, if you come to think of it, in the post-COVID world, or the world that we are living in right now, a average, and we did a study in talking to our customer base, a executive report, an average executive report that the top 5, 10, 15 executives of large banks or large corporations access on a daily, if not an hourly basis, comprises of between 300 to 400 queries made to the data in their organization to be able to come up with that report. Now you add 5 to 10 seconds of latency per query. You are adding, you can do the math, your executives are waiting for hours for that report to load, all right, or to refresh. And by the time they get it, it's too late. Like you said about Walmart, they were accessing data of 90 days. Now it's doing it on a weekly basis, and soon it'll be daily basis, and then it's going to move to an hourly basis, right? So the shelf life of data is shrinking. The executive insights, or any sort of actionable insights, the time, the moment that matters, are shrinking. And the latency and the number of queries that you need to do to be able to act in that moment is increasing. So it's just not low latency, it's ultra low latency in your data architecture, which I personally feel is the number one point of designing a shit happens data architecture. Right? The second, of course, is that we feel that the world is going to be hybrid. Right? I think there would be a lot of data which will still remain not in the cloud. Right? And I do think it'll be multi-cloud for the most part as well. And last but not the least, it will be the workload agnostic, one single SQL query. The other bit is, I think, the query world and the analytics world is SQL, will remain SQL. So I do wish my NoSQL friends all the best, but I don't think they have a great sort of story for the analytical world, and we'll see how that pans out. But I do think that a single ability to have a single query to access all your workloads is going to be the future of data and unsegmented, workloads on a platform where you don't have to have too much data movement. Because one thing I'm sure all of you on this LinkedIn Live all over the world would agree that you hate to see data moving, right? Moving data is hard, it's cumbersome. That's where points of failures tend to emerge. And as far as possible, everyone resists moving data, and that singularity of your data assets in a platform which is low latency and flexible is whether we do it or someone else does it. I think it's just too logical for it not to happen.
Very good. So, what do you see as some of the biggest barriers or challenges for businesses that want to really use data more effectively?
I mean, there are multiple, right? So again, I don't think there is a dearth of intent. Of course, everyone, there is an acknowledgement that they want to do better. They do believe that data is the sort of the boat that's going to take them to the promised land, Shangri-La. So all of those, that acceptance, is there, has been there for a while, and those of them who were on the fence got there due to COVID, right? And the business impacts on COVID. So I think that problem of intentionality is solved, and now it's the how. And I do think, and I'd probably make a provocative statement here. I do think that there is a great sort of change in the talent pool for data workers. Okay. And again, this is not going to be a popular sentiment, but I'm going to say it anyway. I do think that a lot of the data workers of the past are still holding on to the technologies of the past as job security. All right. And therein comes in the fact that if I'm a CEO of a company and I want to manage data and gain great insights, the conventional wisdom is to go hire someone who knows a existing technology that might have been built 30 years ago to solve completely different set of challenges, and get that team to innovatively use that technology to manage my data. That is probably the reverse order. How do I want to manage my data, and what are the outcomes I want out of it? And then what technology is suitable? And then what are the data workers who can enable that shift in my data strategy? Now that is coming. And I do think that, the data workers of yesterday would hold on to their certification from the age-old tools that they have had. And the data workers of the future will embrace new trends in technology, because that is what's going to keep them relevant. And the new technology sets of the future are coming at a pretty rapid pace, and they're solving challenges, and that other technologies actually cannot solve. I mean, we are seeing, just in our little world that we influence, a 30x improvement in performance at 1/10 the cost. I mean, that's not a 20, 30, 40, 50, 100% improvement. It's an order of magnitude difference in terms of latency, in terms of total cost of ownership. And that trend, whether it's us or other, new databases or data technologies that are coming out, have a order of magnitude impact over the old guards in this industry. And yeah, I think it'll get pretty interesting. It'll get pretty interesting. And the last thought on this, from a talent pool perspective, I was speaking to a dear friend of mine who's president of one of the largest SI companies, and out of India, but a global company. and and they just hired, and I could get the numbers wrong, whether it was 50 or 500. That's probably irrelevant. For the analyst role, data analyst roles, they hired, call it 500 liberal arts students. All right. Because what they said is that the tools to get the answers are not the problem. To have the right questions to get the answers for is what they need. And so yeah, I think it's going to be a very interesting shift in what is a relevant data worker, so as to speak. And what is the data worker of the past? My daddy's data worker. And it's going to be interesting. And I think it's an opportunity for most of the sort of talent pool in data to to have a lot of fun and do a lot of creativity. And then yeah, I think if you're going to be process centric versus creative, then you're going to find it hard in the data space going forward. Sorry, but that's the truth.
No, I couldn't agree more, and this is something I've been preaching from since for 20 years now, that you have to start identifying the big questions you want to have an answer to, and then you look for the data and the way you can analyze data. Um, Last time we spoke, you mentioned other challenges like complexities, data silos, different types of data. Do you want to expand on any of those?
Yeah, I think data silos exist. There are Chinese walls in companies between various kinds of data, and I think rationalizing that through unsegmented workload platforms is going to solve that problem. Because I do think that the world, as I said, and I hate to repeat myself on this, but creating data silos and then finding a way to connect them is just illogical in my opinion. Right? I do think now there are technologies available where you can do. You don't need to have data silos. Right? And I think that's where the architecture is going to evolve to. The complexity of data is just going to increase. I mean, really, if you come to think of it logically, Bernard, how do you counter complexity? Because complexity of data is not going to go away. Right? Because with the growth of data comes complexity.
Hmm.
All right? And this is a sort of you know a different thought for from tradition. The one way to conquer complexity is through low latency, because complexity is only going high. How do you then solve the complexity so that you can get insights in a platform which is low latency is a antidote to complexity. All right. Now, the other antidote to complexity, again, this is beating the same old drum of flexibility, is not being locked in to data silos and having a flexible data architecture which is hybrid. So, it's not as if I'm going to tell you something overtly intelligent about it, but it's coming back to the basic blocking and tackling, that the data world will belong to a flexible, low latency, low cost of ownership, technology, and a set of data workers who are more steeped in the future than in the past, and who are more creative than what they were yesterday.
Very good. So, have you got any really good examples of organizations that have tackled those challenges and overcome some of those challenges, maybe from across your customers, that have successfully created a modern data architecture and have been able to leverage data to really drive business performance?
Yeah, more than a few, right? And whether they're our customers or not, I think it's unfair to your audience if I was only going to talk about my customers here or our customers here. I mean, if you come to think of it, we are all experiencing a phenomenal use of data by organizations to save lives. Now, if you come, Bernard, I've thought about this long and hard, and I've got a lot of friends in that industry who are helping us do that. How the logistics around moving vaccinations, right, which require temperatures which were usually not something used for transportation, and being able to monitor not only the average temperature that they have been, but what's the maximum and the minimum at any given point in time in their transportation journey, and be able to ensure that the counts are kept, absolutely sacrosanct, and the delivery of that is happening, would not have happened if the FedExes and the UPSs of the world hadn't got their data architecture in order. Just wouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
So, and
I had a really good conversation with someone that was leading the vaccine distribution from DHL. So anyone who wants to watch this can have a look on my YouTube channel, which talks exactly about all of this, how data and analytics actually enable this global vaccine supply chain challenge, probably the biggest we've ever seen in the world.
yeah, and that to me is just fascinating. And if you were to take a step back from the transportation of vaccine, is the development of the vaccine, right? I mean, you know this well. The average field trial of drugs ran into years, right? And the reason why it was compressed, of course, there was the emergency and the use and all the rest of it, which was a big reason why it was compressed as well. But the availability and access to copious amounts of data, right, also compressed the clinical trials of these vaccines. So, I mean, if someone wants a prime example of innovative use of data architecture to save lives, well, almost save civilization, there you would be hard pressed to find a better example. I'm sure you might find a better example, but I'm hard pressed to find a better example. The other use of data for sort of innovative purposes was, keeping this pandemic in mind, was how, as I alluded to, a very large telco provider, and one of the biggest 5G telco providers in the States, overnight on a dime. So we helped them manage their network telemetry, right? So Bernard, what sort of cell towers did he bounce off in the last day, week, month? And then what is the movement of Bernard? Of course, there to them you are a subscriber and not Bernard. You're a cell phone number, naturally for data protection and personal information protection. However, on a dime, in I think it was 17 days or 21 days, we could, based on that network telemetry, help that telecommunication provider offer a track and trace. This is about a year ago now. It's prehistoric era, but at that time it was just absolutely unique on how they could do a track and trace, and then enable the app on the phone which said, if you subscribe to any subscriber that you come in contact with that is COVID positive, and that notification would be sent to you. It's phenomenal. Come to think of it, could you imagine even 10 years ago to say, hey, if you ever came in touch with someone who's then gone and tested positive for a disease, you will get a notification on your mobile phone. All right. So it's a fascinating use of data from that perspective. And then, of course, what I admire is how the communities of even open source developers and all the developers out there who are using their skills to help underprivileged sector of the society, the ease of getting in the queue to get vaccinated. All right, and people who are not as probably fluent with technology to be able to do it themselves, making it so much easier for them to go enroll for vaccinations. And we are seeing all those things prop up pro bono. And that is the goodness in society that is just worth celebrating. We see so much of negativity all over the press and the news, but it's things like that that data enables the best in us. And I'm a romantic at heart, and an optimist, and I do think that data brings out uh, the best in society, right? And yeah, I tend to ignore that Prince of Nigeria emails, but I do think that there's a lot more good than bad that data promotes.
Are there any, you talk about all the good that data does, and I completely agree with you. I'm completely passionate about all the good things, and I believe, like you, that the good outweighs the bad. But do you have any, and what are your main concerns about how we use data? Because there are companies, there are governments that are not using the data in the way that the two of us would like them to use it.
Yeah,
Any views on that?
I think controlling society through social media and their behavior on social media is not something that I think is the positive use of data. And I have never been supportive of that, nor do us, nor is our company, and never will be. No if and buts about it. I think the lack of privacy of and I applaud Apple here, by the way, because it's funny that I have conversation with a friend about my favorite Scotch, and I start getting ads on my phone and on my social media feeds about that. At an intrinsic level, is just cannot be good for society. It just isn't, right? And by the way, there are tons of friends who have done very, very well, and dear friends of mine who made a very good living of social media, extremely well. So I got to be careful about how I say this, but I do think it's just pure respect for the human, right? Of giving them the privacy, and of course we hide behind that you have to sign up and opt in for all of that. A lot of those opt-ins aren't fully understood by people who are opting in, and I just absolutely applaud Apple for some of the decisions that they have made. And like with everything good, there is a bad. I am very, very concerned about fake news, and how it actually, if you do follow certain news types, the data then gives you a propensity score for what news you should be receiving. So it just furthers the bias that you have through, I mean, that entire phenomenon through articles that you should be the last person to read, right? And by the way, which are mostly false. And some of the impact that it has had on society, I can it's going to take centuries to repair, right? And that is a disappointing part of data. But now that said, I'm still more optimistic about the Thorns of the world and the Go Guardians of the world, and the vaccine promotions of the world, and what data is doing to that than that. But yes, there is a negative side of data, which we will never participate as SingleStore. So yeah.
Which is good. I need to ask, what is your single? What is your favorite Scotch? You said you when you talk here.
Yeah, I knew you were going to ask that. It's it's everyday drinking. I like my Belvini 14-year-old oaken cask, so I like
Right.
that. Every time I get a gift of a superior bottle, I very much, whether it's from my wife or my friends. I recently got a Macallan 18, and then another friend of mine gifted me a Macallan rare 20-year-old, and I drink that like God's nectar. So very sparingly, but I enjoy that immensely. But I wouldn't be a true Indian if I didn't like a blue label Johnny Walker, right? So of course I enjoy that as well.
Very good. Love it. I just thought that as a fellow Scotch lover, I had to ask.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And if we ever happen to be face to face, then let's sample a few.
Absolutely. So obviously, since COVID, the world has changed. Data has become more important. But what's your view on the future of work, and maybe the role you see for data in this new future of work?
Yeah, it's something that I spend a lot of time on or at Bernard, as you can imagine. We were a company that had, and we still continue to have a very optimistic view of our future. And in planning for that, we take great pride in providing workplaces which are as optimistic about our future as the finances or the opportunity conveys. Nice offices, nice workplaces, nice work environments. Spend a lot of time to ensure that the employees feel a sense of belonging. The biggest thing that COVID-19, at least from a CEO perspective, and I don't know if it's the biggest, but one of the things that it becomes very hard to do is a lot of the employees are. I was just hearing another coach of mine talk to me about it yesterday. He has the acronym SAD. They are sad and they're societally disconnected, and the D for that is just disconnected. And the disconnect in employees in an organization is the biggest factor to bridge. All right. And the disconnection is not because they're disconnected from work and enjoying a scotch in the afternoon. That's not the point. The disconnection is that if you're in the office, then you see the CEO, you see the CFO, you see your colleagues, you see people around you, and you feel the sense of belonging that is invoked by 10,000 years of your human DNA. All right. I mean, that's how we have lived for, whether it's 10,000 or 4,000, 6,000, whatever, right? That's what builds trust in teams. That's what makes me feel that you, my team leader, has my back, or you, my colleague or my peer, has my back. All right. I struggle with that as well. My DNA isn't trained enough to have a trust building exercise on Zoom, right? I've been trained, as have you been, right, Bernard, to sit in the same room and see a person twitch or smile or take a sigh or scratch his eyelid, to be able to sense where the conversation is going and how trust is being built. Now, that disconnect and bridging that during the COVID environment has been a seminal challenge for most executives and most companies. Right? Some have done it well, some haven't done it well. But the intent has been there for them to feel connected. Now, naturally, you can communicate a lot. And I think over communication is something which is a good thing. We just, as a company, when we had offices and we still pay a lot of money for a company our size in real estate for offices, we would do in-person all hands and beers afterwards or pizzas afterwards. We would sit on the same lunch table and bond over breaking bread and a drink. Now, how do you create that environment in a virtual environment? Is always going to be hard, right? So now the reason I've provided you this commentary is that I am not completely at a place right now, rightly or wrongly, that believes that we will be 100% remote. Of course, there'll be exceptions, but I do believe that the solution, at least for the foreseeable future, is a hybrid work environment, right? Where certain roles and the way you categorize roles, or one of the ways you categorize roles, is in a 2x2 metric, which is, are you more process or more creative, right? Does your job require more process or more creativity? And are you working on a new project or an existing project? So you get, four, blocks. And depending on that block, the ratio of remote and in-office work should be determined, right? Because I think, work that is more process, which is, again, very, very important in organizations, is more has a greater propensity for remote work.
Mm.
All right. But teams that require and feed off each other's creativity need to be in offices a lot more than remote. Right. So that is one starting point which says, we will determine, or not we will determine, we will have help and we'll have surveys and we'll talk to our employees and any help that we can get to have a score by teams as to, what sort of ratio should they have of remote versus in office work.
Mm.
And depending on that, we would have allocated team days that a team assembles in the office, whether it's 1 day, 2 days, or 4 days a week. And then, remainder of the time they would be remote. And of course, if there are needs that someone has to be remote for whatever reason, we would absolutely support that. That's not the point. Now, fundamental to this shift is also something which is more important than anything to me is employee safety.
Mm.
All right. And how do you ensure that when we do open our premises, which I believe at least in Santa Clara is going to happen fairly soon, touch wood, or someone actually texted me earlier this morning that it's likely that it already has. And how do we ensure that proper precautions are taken and data is being used for safety of our employees, right from diagnostic testing, rapid testing, temperature checks, cubicles being 6 feet apart, to using data and systems to help our colleagues oscillate between office and remote work.
Mm.
All right. Because if something is a process, then that doesn't have to be reinvented every day. All right. So, how do you stabilize that and work on exceptions rather than on something which you've done 1,000 times before? All right. Now, that is one. The other bit which is extremely important, which tends to get people disconnected, is they don't get feedback as to if what they are doing is firstly being appreciated, all right? Because in a team meeting, you can actually say, slap someone's back and say, well done, I like it. Or even just sit in the conference room and point at that person and say, that was good.
Mm.
That ability is taken away. So being able to have a format to provide feedback, transparent, respectful feedback, is again very data centric, right? It also requires clear goal settings, right, as what is required. And then the onus is on the management team to actually then stitch not the narrative, but the work that they do on a daily, weekly basis with the goals of the organization and how they are progressing on it,
Mm.
which requires planned communication, constant communication from employees. And last but not the least, I do think as a leader of of a company which is only 250, 300, I have seen the need to be a lot more patient when answering employee questions because the tenor of the questions have changed over the last year or so, and it has nothing to do with anything else but the desire to belong, right, to connect, right. And I think that patience and empathy, as hard as it can be at times, is required of us leaders to see our employees who I'm sure all of us love dearly, to get through this hump, and hopefully the end is in sight, and help them get there feeling good about themselves and just improved humans and professionals.
Yeah, very, very much. I think this echoes lots of the conversations I have with other CEOs across the globe from all types of organizations, that figuring out what this new normal might be, what's the right balance between working from home and remotely and being in the office, not losing some of the organizational culture, and putting systems in place that facilitate all of this with data at the center, I think is absolutely vital. Um, so maybe we can finish off with your hopes and predictions for the future of data or data platforms. Any final thoughts, Raj?
Yeah, I think the platform of the future will always be 2 years ahead of us. I think you know data and data platforms, as long as we all accept that this is a journey and not a destination, it's going to be fun, and that's why I'm here. Because if we think that we have all the answers right now, then we're just wrong. Right? The data platform of the future is something that I will find out later today, and then again tomorrow, and then again the week after. And that growth learner's mindset is what's exciting about being in data. And if it wasn't that, then I would probably have taken a more predictable, sort of profession for myself. So I do know that the basic tenets of the platform of the future would be a converged platform. That's for sure. And that would require a lot of dismantling of complexities around data and data types, and rethinking the architecture of how we use data for speed, right, and for something that I've said in the past, low latency, something which doesn't penalize change, which allows you to change on a dime without the penalty of change, both in terms of money and cash, money and time being the least.
Mm.
Also, it allows onboarding to be a lot quicker, right? It allows self-learning, to happen. It empowers the data users by being able to have them come to the conclusions themselves, rather than requiring a smooth talking sales rep or a sales engineer trying to convince you in a certain direction. And the empowerment of the data workers of the world is something that we at SingleStore take very seriously. And we are also transforming our business from being the 5%, or managing 95% of 5% of the organizations, to managing 5% of the 95% of the organization. And that's a very different mindset.
Mhm.
And that mindset is steeped in the fact of the consumption of your technology has to be extremely, extremely smooth and easy, and not non-punitive. The usage and the onboarding has to be extremely simple. Success has to be derived from our product in the least amount of time and effort. And most importantly, Bernard, and I know I've said this before, is we have to move from a lock-in architecture to a earn-it architecture.
Mm.
And I think it was Excel which had the exit button, right? That if you want to exit Excel into some other data sheet, you can do it by pressing a button. I do think that databases will have an exit button, and whether it's actually a button or a ease of being able to transform will be a necessity. And I think it should be required by people who choose technology, because again, the lock-in architecture is something which will not progress the human society forward. Actually, it's going to keep us back, and I'm a big believer in that. So, and my hope is also in the talent pool, because some of the stuff that I hear on my feed, and the kind of talent and innovation and creativity that I see from this talent pool is just, it's just energizing. It's just the passion that I see in people to truly use their skills and their data skills to make this world a better place is humbling. It's, as I said, energizing. It's it just shows um, how the best of human society is in front of us and not behind us. And yeah.
It's they're very very nice words to finish on. So thank you very much for your very amazing, interesting thoughts, thought-provoking ideas, and thank you just for spending time sharing all of this with us today. anyone who wants to re-listen to any of these conversations, to this one or to any of my other conversations, head to my YouTube channel, where you can find many other fascinating conversations around data and technology, or subscribe to my podcast, where you can listen to those again, where you can have the ability to listen to this one at some in a few weeks as well. Thank you very much, Raj. Anyone listening, let us know what you thought, as always. And I hope you enjoyed today. And I wish everyone a good day. Thank you very much.
Thank you, my friend, and stay safe and well. And we'll
Thank
be
you.
in touch. Bye now.
Bye bye.